Congressman, you and I have spoken many times. I have fewer words tonight than I have on most nights. There are people who have pointed out that the president is entirely within his right to have Vindman reassigned, to have Gordon Sondland, who was a Trump supporter and fundraiser, called back. We're not entirely sure why Vindman's brother has been reassigned. But there is no part of it that anyone can convince me does not feel a whole lot like authoritarianism tonight, a night of long knives.
That's right. I think that leaders in those types of countries exact retribution against people who would tell the truth against them. And they also, in doing so, try to send a signal to other people to basically deter, scare them, and prevent them from doing the same. And I think that's exactly what happened tonight. However, I also have to say that, unfortunately, senators, United States senators, this past week helped enable President Trump to do what he did today. And that being said, when the president first tried to go after the whistleblower, when the whistleblower came out, 17 witnesses came forward to tell the truth, including Lieutenant Colonel Vindman. There are a lot of people courageous within the public service corps of our government who are watching and who will hopefully come forward in the future with evidence of wrongdoing, just as he did bravely in this episode.
Thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on the button below for more from The Last Word and the rest of MSNBC.